Well, the interesting thing about fracking is that it's going to lead to a lot more controls on water supply and maybe even a freshwater shortage, which will come about due to the contamination of the water supply from fracking. This is actually well known now because amongst people who are in the areas where fracking's going. Like you can see somebody lighting their faucet, and the water's on fire due to all the natural gas that is mixed in with the water due to the pressurized hydraulic fracking that's been going on in that area. So it's been going on in Pennsylvania, it's going on in the Dakotas. But it's going to lead to one issue versus another because the oil companies have already, or the ones that are actually in charge of the oil companies and also the ones that are pushing for global controls on everything there is, have already started to move into the area of water. And this is going to be the next thing that's going to be controlled and taxed and you name it. So even though, like, for instance, you look at this fracked water, probably maybe it came from a well or whatever, given a few cycles through nature where it evaporates, because when water evaporates, that's nature's distillation process. You know, the sun basically, evaporates water, and maybe the clouds might pick up some impurities, but when it comes down, it's rainwater. Other than the impurities that it may pick up in the air, it is just pure, plain distilled water. And when it comes down and maybe mixes in the stream, it picks up some minerals and things like that. But it filters through layers of sand in the soil and it goes down into the aquifers again. It will be clean. It will be cleaned up again. But they're going to actually, this fracking is going to lead to a crisis that is actually playing into the hands of the global elite. And I just can't escape me that, it's not some kind of insidious plan. Because I realize that, the obvious what's going on with this deal, because not only is it poisoning our water supply, I'm not somebody that's like, I'm for green earth, but it's like, I guess there's a smart way and a dumb way, and I guess the smart way would be more like solar panels and Tesla energy, but, what are you going to do? We have oil, we need oil, but maybe we don't need as much oil. I know I've been aware of inventions that have been squashed over the years, and I also realized that even if you want to get really simple 101 without getting highly, highly technical, we can grow plants that could provide our fuel. Henry Ford was a major proponent of using plant-based fuels. As a matter of fact, it was John D. Rockefeller that basically put an end to that by giving $4 million to the women's suffrage movement back in, I think it was the late 1800s, because they wanted to ban the sale of alcohol, and John D. Rockefeller was in competition with the farmers that were selling alcohol to the cars. So, in other words, say, for instance, all our oil products came from hemp, which produces 10 times the amount of gasoline as corn. And actually, Rudolph Diesel, he originally wanted his diesel engine to run on hemp oil, not from crude oil products. We'd be growing things that would clean the air and provide oxygen in the air, and that would be our fuel source and also our materials source, which would replace plastics and things like that. So we don't even need to get highly technical with any kind of high-end Tesla energy or even like using some of the battery technology from Tesla Motor Corporation. But what's going on is, what's pretty obvious though, is that fracking is poisoning our water aquifers and at the same time using huge, vast quantities of water. And you can see this even going on in Canada. It's going on in the USA. It's going on everywhere. So I think there's a plan to this. There's a method to the madness. It's like they're not just greed and stupidity. It's greed, but they're not stupid. They have a plan because in the future, the one element that's actually going to be is worth as much as oil is going to be the water. The water itself. As a matter of fact, between the border of India and Pakistan, there could be a major confrontation due to due to the water supply that is lacking in Pakistan and India, and that area of the world is actually undergoing a lot of areas that are drought because there's not enough fresh water to go around. And they're actually creating this problem maybe in the United States with this vast shale oil boom. Well, so in a way, if the shale oil industry gets squashed down a little bit in the United States, that might not be such a bad thing. But what would you do to drive your car? You know, maybe the HHO will be a solution to bring lessen demand. Not that you can eliminate it, or lessen demand might help a little bit. But eventually, oil prices are going to go way the hell up due to this. They're not going to be able to, But I also want to point out something else that there's a lot of shale oil gas plays, and some of them are really located in our national parks. Now, you heard about like what's going on in Texas, and you heard about what's going on in Pennsylvania. You heard about what's going on in North Dakota. But actually, a lot of areas in our national parks in Colorado has a hell of a lot of shale oil, and it's my contention that Miss Hillary Clinton is going to actually allow them to tap into those areas that are actually, sacred areas for wildlife. You're not allowed to destroy the environment. She's going to allow it to happen, and that's probably one reason she might get elected and reelected for a second term. At the same time, what they're going to do is poison our environment. So I think this is the insidious plan of the global elite or the oil barons in the United States. And, to tell you the truth, though, every single elitist in this world is tied in with oil, which includes Vladimir Putin especially, because 70% of the money that revenue that comes into Russia comes in from energy sources like crude oil and natural gas. But none of them will advocate industrial hemp. But what's going on today is that if you look, I'm just kind of showing a little bit of a world political map, Saudi Arabia has announced that they're lowering their oil prices, or they're keeping up their output, which lowered oil prices to record lows, or to the lowest they've been in 4 years, because they want to target the U.S. industry, is one of the reasons they said, but also they want to target Iran and Russia because they consider them both the enemies. Now, what's interesting about this announcement that they said, how come they're doing it now and they did not do this originally when the shale oil industries were starting to take off in the USA? To me, it's actually, I think, very much so that they were being told to say this because of what happened recently in Ukraine and Russia's adventures in Ukraine. And where I see this is all leading to is probably a global conflict. I think it was in the last week we saw the Russian North Fleet in the narrowest part of the English Channel. Besides, all the different times they've been flying planes over near NATO territory, up by Alaska, up by Canada, up by the UK, and they're being intercepted. There's been a number of incidents like that haven't happened that numerous even during the Cold War. The Russian fleet is now actually in the narrowest part of the English Channel. So it's a show of force. And then Russia itself is actually stating that they possess some serious nuclear surprises, and also it's been shown officially that Russia is now on par with the USA with nuclear-tipped missiles, and they are probably ahead of the USA as far as the technology, having the latest computer systems to launch, because our missile systems are still actually controlled by floppy disk, even not even the old, the 3.5-inch floppy disk, but the big ones, So, it's kind of like I don't know if where this is going to lead to, but I have a big suspicion that just like World War I and World War II, we're being led into another trap, and we might be being led into World War III. So, but out of the ashes will arise the new world order. So, but one thing I'm also realizing, though, is that and I put this as common sense because I realize that Saudi is not, I think they're not acting only on their own. I think they were told, it's a cover story that they're saying they are attacking the U.S. industry, shale oil industry, but I'm thinking that's a good thing, but I think it's very, very temporary. But I think it's a good thing because if they actually did stop the U.S. shale oil industry, what would happen is they could not, the water supply would not be tainted. It would save the environment. It would cause people to buy vehicles or find ways to use vehicles and use less gasoline, whether they're using hybrids, whether they're using electric vehicles, or they're modifying existing vehicles with some HHO to boost the fuel mileage maybe 10 to 20%. And it does work, though. I mean, a lot of people say that doesn't work, but it does work. The thing is, if that happened, in other words, it would force people to be innovators, and we find a way around a solution, and it would cut the power away from the oil industry itself, and it'd probably give a lot more political impetus to growing hemp in the USA versus fracking. Because once, when you have something like fracking going in the USA, and the prices are cheap, and everybody's saying, "Oh yeah, everything's fine with me," right now, they're not thinking in the future. But if, say, for instance, it became where oil was extremely expensive and gasoline was $8 to $10 a gallon, people would clamor. And if people start finding out that hemp, that industrial hemp was a good, viable alternative solution that produced 10 times the amount of gasoline as corn, there would be a big political voice or big political movement to get it going. But considering that oil is cheap and fracking is going strong, there's not going to be a big political movement to get hemp moving. So, that's the flip side to it. When something's cheap, there's no incentive to find alternatives. There's no incentive to find alternatives. That's a problem. But if you want to actually say and entertain the thought that Saudi Arabia was actually targeting the USA and targeting Iran and Russia, if that was a fact, it would be in the interest of both. Well, Iran already wants to have a war with. If Iran could wipe out Saudi or Saudi can wipe out Iran, either side would have done it. There's a major divide between the Sunni and Shiite Muslims. But it would be in the interest of both Russia and the United States to foster a war in this area and take all that oil supply off the market, and therefore the oil from the U.S. and Russia would go up astronomically. I'm not sure if that's going to come about. It may, but if Saudi's really not being told by the USA to say what they're saying, that may be the next maneuver, because Saudi may be thinking very, very short term. Very short term, because their refineries could easily be knocked out in a major confrontation, and both Russia and the United States would greatly benefit. But let me just get back to the original premise here, is that fracking is actually something that's going to lessen our water supply, poison our water supply. It uses up a lot of water. At the same time, it poisons a lot of water. It's going to lead to a crisis of water. And after, say, oil is becoming more and more expensive to extract because there's less of because, as you know, there's a lot of oil on this earth, but the problem is it gets more expensive to extract. Um, it's going to lead to a crisis of fresh water, which is going to lead to global controls. And it's also going to lead to the carbon tax because of all the pollution that oil fracking causes. Because even if it's not global warming, say, gets thrown out the door as a scientific argument, it's going to cause a crisis in water. It's definitely causing a crisis in fresh water, no doubt about it. So even without the global warming argument, and say the global warming argument was proven to be totally false, the fact that there's so much fracking going on, it's still causing an environmental crisis. So they still have a reason or an excuse to push for a global carbon tax. So these guys got you one way or the other. The only thing I could say is while it's cheap and while oil is cheap and gasoline is going down, I'm going to still pursue different methods of saving on gasoline through HHO for one. HHO. That's the only thing I know right now that can put or every single car out there could get a slight benefit. And even in newer vehicles now they're not even that new, from 1996 on, the ODBC2, the onboard diagnostics, where they regulate the air-fuel ratio to cars. You can't, if you eject HHO, the only way for it to work is to modify the emissions control, which is illegal. But there's now something brand new where they have a special separator where the oxygen and any electrolyte and any water is filtered out of the HHO and only pure hydrogen is added into the engine. It's a $30 to $40 add-on to the HHO kit that this way you would not have to buy any kind of emissions modification electronic chips, and you will get your benefit. Even if it's only 10%, it's 10%. It's 10%. And that's probably what I would try to expect out of something like that, a 10% gain. But as people discover more and more, they might unlock the frequencies and the secrets that will tell us exactly how to split hydrogen from water in a far more efficient manner, because the technology, even the simple, crude, brute force methods that are out there today that you apply to engine technology, have been getting better and better over the years. I'll post a link on some of the videos I did on my Jeep. It was a real simple $165 modification, and it got me a 15% mileage boost, which was pretty damn good. Well worth it. And but as this technology gets perfected, we can still probably use the crude oil, but maybe use a hell of a lot less of it. And if we can actually get the gasoline from hemp itself, we can totally avoid the problems of murky water. And the other thing is with growing hemp is that hemp doesn't require any really pesticides or anything like that, or it doesn't. It's a very hardy plant. So you don't have to worry about runoff from pesticides like when you're growing corn and things that get into the water. It just grows. In 4 months later, it's like, a dozen feet high, and you harvest the crop and you plant another one. It doesn't deplete the soil or nothing. And besides providing fuel, it also provides material, which combined with resins will be stronger than plastics. Or fiberglass, and it also provides oils and food and proteins, and a perfect protein and a perfect omega type oils in the right balance. So you can avoid all this problem with the water becoming tainted from the fracking process. So there are solutions out there. We got to get political, and we got to not be fooled by the powers that be, because the powers that be probably have a very shrewd game, and they're creating a crisis, and they're going to benefit by the crisis they created. While they profited from the oil, they're going to actually benefit by profiting from water, which should be free for everybody. Water should be free for everybody. It's on this planet. It's always reused. We have water that goes back probably billions of years. And if you want to look at other studies that just came out, they found in the water that there's water in oceans beneath the oceans. Like they found an ocean, they said, with seismological equipment that's below China, that's at least as big as the Arctic Ocean. This is new discoveries in the last few years. So there's now it's way, way deep. I mean, it's many, 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 many miles down. It's in a transition zone between the mantle and the core that they found an ocean below. It's not like a ocean you could sail on, but an area of the Earth that is a mixture of liquid and rock, and it's mainly liquid. So there's a lot more water on this Earth than people are saying. And just like there's a lot more oil on this Earth, but you know what they're going to do? They're going to charge you money for water because they're creating a problem right now with this fracking garbage. And we have a solution already. We can do industrial hemp, but we're not going to get that right away until it becomes a real crisis. So in the meantime, I just want people to realize what the enemy is, how the games, these shrewd games the enemy is playing, and how they're destroying our environment. I'm all for keeping the environment clean. I'm all for being able to have cheap energy too. But I also realize that they're going to profit by the oil, and then they're also going to profit by the water that they destroyed and tainted. And if we get back to nature and just grow plants, we would solve the problem. And in the meantime, probably the best thing to do is to use less oil. And right now, I think the big thing is the HHO. But I'm going step by step on that. And I think that's a very cheap, simple benefit for any combustion engine out there that anybody can do, and even on the newer cars, because now you have that separator that separates pure hydrogen from the HHO, which means you don't have to do any kind of illegal modification to your emission system. You just inject pure hydrogen in the engine, which gives you a more complete burn of the existing air fuel mixture that's in there. It doesn't add more energy. It doesn't. You're not getting more energy by expending energy. What you're doing is you're getting a more complete burn of the existing fuel. That's why it works. But it does help. It does help, and it's a step in the right direction. And the way I look at it is you're not going to find a panacea, everything. I found the solution to everything all at once. You got to do it in steps. But in the meantime, these guys up in the industry, they know what they're doing. They're telling homeowners that the water's fine and everything like that, and it's not fine. And people like Hillary Clinton, who probably will be reelected in the next election, I'm not hoping she gets elected, but she's going to be one of the ones that is going to actually leave it open to fracking in some of the most pristine areas of the USA in national parks, because there's vast oil reserves in Colorado in the national parks. And I'll guarantee you this lady is going to let that happen. And you'll be surprised, once they get in office, they do what they want. That's what happens.